All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PayScout's Convenience Fee webinar. This meeting is being recorded, and everyone who is in attendance will receive a link to the recording after the meeting. We have auto-muted the attendees to limit background noise and reduce the interference, but this is an interactive webinar. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom meeting window, you'll see a Participants tab and a Chat tab. By clicking on the Participants tab, there's a button that says Raise Hand. Fran is going to ask a question in the beginning of the webinar and ask for a hand-raised response. So you can do so by clicking that Participants tab. In the Chat tab, you can write questions. So there will be a Q&A. If any questions arise throughout the presentation, please submit them via the chat function, and at the end of the session, Fran will be addressing the most relevant questions. So do take advantage of the opportunity to submit a question. If your question is not answered or you have additional questions after the webinar, as always, please contact your relationship manager. So without further ado, we're going to jump into today's webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce Fran Fisher. Fran is the channel manager, ARM, for PayScout, overseeing ARM industry sales. She's the former owner, president, and CEO of Revenue Recovery Consultants. She previously served as the marketing director for the Credit Recovery Bureau and district sales manager for Trans World Systems. Fran is a past president of the Virginia Collectors Association and a longtime member of ACA International. She currently serves as ACA's Federal Affairs Committee and formerly served as a member of the Council of Delegates representing ACA's affiliate division and the Education Foundation Board of Directors. Welcome and thank you, Fran.
Thank you, George. So I know a lot of you that are on this webinar, and some of you, this is the first time we're getting to know each other, but I wanted to welcome everybody. Before we get started with the detail, I do want to ask a couple of questions. And as George said, how many merchants ask you about convenience fees? So if you guys will just click to raise your hand so we can see how many, that would be terrific. Excellent. So I see we have a few. And then the second question, how many of you have lost deals because you didn't have that option when a merchant asked for it? So we have a couple of those too. All right, so that at least gives us a frame of reference. So on our convenience fee overview, what I want to talk about is why PayScout came to offering this as an option for agents to sell and for merchants to utilize. We've had a lot of questions about it recently as well. So the first thing, because we have always in the past said we didn't think convenience fees were a compliant way to do business, and therefore we didn't want to offer something that we didn't believe was fully compliant for the benefit of our merchants. So the first thing that got us thinking about this was the evolving regulatory environment. In July of 2017, the CFPB issued guidance about convenience fees that essentially reversed what they had said informally previously. The guidance in July was that convenience fees they didn't see as inherently wrong or bad for consumers as long as law and regulation were followed. That was a complete about-face to the previous administration's CFPB authority, saying that they felt convenience fees were terrible for consumers and it was one of those things they were going to start looking into. The second thing that got us thinking was the changing competitive landscape. While there have been for years a handful of ISOs that were offering a convenience fee model, they weren't really aggressively marketing. Every once in a while we'd have an inquiry about it, but not a lot until recent competitors have come out backed by recognized experts in the industry and are really aggressively pushing the convenience fee model as a compliant way of doing things. As we started investigating what we might be able to do, we started looking at the compliance. And while all of our competitors that are out there are compliant one way or another, they're not compliant as far as we believe fully. And that means you need to follow not just FDCPA in an ARM environment for collection agencies, but we also need to look at the card brand rules and take a look at the compliance. And we have endeavored to do that with our convenience fee process. There are actually 3 different types of fees that are defined for the card brand rules. And we're using Visa as the model because Visa is the most strict in their rules, and Visa also enforces more than the others. So Visa defines 3 different types of fees. They define a service fee, a surcharge, and a convenience fee. And there are specific rules surrounding each of those types of fees. A service fee is specific only to certain MCC codes. Utilities, government entities, and schools can offer a service fee. It can be a separate transaction. It can be a percentage of the transaction, but they're very specific only to those types of entities, not for any other type of business. A surcharge is primarily on card-present transactions, but the key issue with the surcharge is a surcharge can only be charged on credit transactions. In the ARM space, those transactions, credit transactions, are typically anywhere between 30 and 35% of the total transactions, and therefore it's not viable for collection agencies. The other type of fees, convenience fees, is what we settled on and what we're going to talk about today. FDCPA compliance is very simple. As long as the collection agency is not charging the fee, it's compliant with FDCPA as long as you pay attention to those states that specifically restrict. PayScout's solution, the fully compliant solution, has several things that we want to discuss today with you. First of all, the key differentiators are the way we're handling the compliance. And ours is fully compliant to both aspects. Like I said, FDCPA is very simple. Card brand rules are not so simple. There's a list of rules and restrictions that need to be followed on convenience fees. The primary ones are that it's a single payment amount, can't be 2 separate payments. The principal and the
Fran,
fee
I just want to make sure. Sorry, Fran, I just want to make sure you're able to advance the slides so we can follow along.
Aha. Thank you, George. I was advancing the slides. My sharing was paused. Apologize, guys. Anyway, as I was saying, key differentiators, the full compliance. For convenience fees, you need to have the key factors are a single payment. They have to be charged by the merchant of record, and it has to be a flat amount that's offered as a single type of fee on all payment types that go through a channel. So let me explain that a little bit more. A channel being either Modo or e-commerce, which is commonly how most ARM companies do business, or in person or by mail. So all payment types through that particular channel, that includes card and ACH, need to be charged the same fee. The consumer has to have the option to opt out, and there has to be a free option. That would be mailing in the payment or walking in the door to a collection agency, which happens occasionally, rarely, but occasionally. So we've got that built into our logic. On the other aspects of compliance, being the single payment and charged by the merchant of record, obviously the collection agency, to be FDCPA compliant, cannot be charging the fee. That leaves PayScout as the payment provider charging the fee, and therefore we've set up our convenience fee model where PayScout is a payment facilitator, and therefore we are the merchant of record, and the merchant themselves is a sub-merchant on the convenience fee account. Now, how we're going to determine where transactions go is all set up in our gateway, and the logic and the risk management is all handled in the gateway. So our gateway, whether it's via an API connection or a web portal that we're going to, the transaction consumer or collector will go in and will enter the transaction. They'll validate the transaction, which sends a query to the gateway based upon the state of residence, and will come back with a window either to the consumer or to the collector, which either gives them the fee amount that has been predetermined along with the payment and the total payment amount and appropriate authorization text, or will give them a plain vanilla payment page with, just for argument's sake, the $100 payment. We have built into our logic the restricted states, and we'll get to those later. And we also have logic built in for Wisconsin, which is the only state that specifically allows convenience fees, but they have limits of 3% or $25 regardless of the balance. So we have that logic built in as well. And we'll return the appropriate fee and the total amount. The descriptor for the consumer, which has to show up on their statement as one payment, will be PSG asterisk, which is the way a payment facilitator needs to set up, with the merchant's name after, so that we're trying to eliminate confusion. The merchant never sees the transaction, never sees the fee transaction, has no access to the funds, and then we're doing split funding behind the scenes where the $100 would go to the merchant and the $5 goes to PayScout. The merchant is not billed for that sub-merchant mid, and PayScout pays the fees to MES, which is the processing partner right now that we're using. The gateway has the ability, in addition to handling all of that logic, has the ability to handle recurring payments, and I'll address those a little bit later on, and has the ability to do a number of other things, but the key thing is being able to do that split funding and also being able to manage the transaction traffic to determine which merchant ID it goes to. The normal one, for existing merchants, we can use the MID that's already set up. For new merchants, we'd set up a regular MID, and we'd set up a convenience fee MID in the payment facilitator setup. We have various API integrations. So as most of you know, most of our API integrations to the software partners that we have are through the USAE Pay Gateway. Roydan Bloodhound has just completed their integration with the Paywire Gateway. Ontario has a statement of work in process, and it's scoped, and they will be starting work to integrate their new payment service platform to Paywire. And there are a couple of other small ones, and we're talking with all of them. In the meantime, if we don't have a full API integration to a particular software, we are creating pop-up windows that will mirror what the collector sees in software, and will query just enough information from the software so that the collector doesn't have to retype all the demographic stuff, and that will go directly to the gateway as well. And we handle that with a technical conversation with each merchant that's looking for the solution to figure out the best way to configure. They can also always use the virtual terminal if that's what they're used to doing. Also available at launch, which is targeted right now for February 1st, will be a basic web page that will be enhanced in a future release that will not take very long to allow for virtual collector actions such as payment plans and setting up recurring payments and doing settlement negotiation and all that kind of thing. Those gateway features will be included with the convenience fee product. If anybody chooses to use convenience fees, then they will get that automatically. So, as I said, we have logic built in for the restricted states. The states you see on this list as of last week are the restricted states. Typically, you hear in collection circles 11 states thrown out that are restricted, but there are actually a couple more because of card brand restrictions or laws specifically against surcharging and convenience fees in various states. This list got one state shorter last week because New York lifted its ban based on some case law that had been pending, and there was a settlement that was agreed to last week on the 16th. We will be constantly monitoring those restrictions. We expect restricted states to be dropping off because of cases, and these restrictions include those states that have statutes that absolutely restrict but that haven't been overturned by case law, and those states where case law is veering in the wrong direction, for example, Arizona. So that we feel, and we have gotten the advice of our various attorneys. We went to our compliance attorney on the FDCPA side and our payments compliance attorney and got their buy-in to our program. And they are they've reviewed this list and are in agreement with us that that's the wise restriction. If merchants want to restrict more states because they feel uncomfortable, we can always do that, but we won't do less than this. So as I said before, we have the option of having a basic payment page. This is not fully complete yet. As I said, we're launching February 1st, and we've been working furiously to get this set up. But this gives you an idea of what the basic payment page looks like. This would be the consumer portal. After they have entered their state and demographic information, this page would pop up. We are still working on the authorization language, so I know some of you are probably looking and saying that's not sufficient. We realize it's not sufficient. It's kind of a placeholder, but essentially they would get an authorization page that shows them the convenience fee and the total payable amount. They choose whether they're making a credit card payment or a check payment, and then it goes on to another page that brings up either the check information or the cardholder information to enter to validate. So that's what the offsite buy page looks like. There will be enhancements to this, as I said before, that will allow for data to be uploaded so that balances can be viewed and payments can be negotiated and all those kind of things. This would be an example of the pop-up window, the OCX screenshots. So when we do a full API integration, it will be seamless to collectors using any software. The API integration, they'll be using whatever window they would normally use in the software. This particular pop-up window mirrors Ontario's fax system because our beta merchant uses that setup and Ontario's API isn't fully completed yet. So we've created this for them. The pop-up window, actually, the collector would type in the debtor ID, and then the pop-up window would pull in the basic demographics, including the state. And this is just an example of what can be done. The OCX pop-up window can be customized based upon different software or whatever's desired. Within reason, the function and the logic is behind this, but the pop-up window can be created to look like what they're used to seeing so that it's not confusing to the collectors. They don't have to go off to a different web portal and log into a virtual terminal. The key is to make it as easy and seamless as possible. Having run a collection agency, I understand that the seconds that it takes to go to another website and to log in and to post a payment adds up at the end of the day and makes a huge impact on the productivity of a collection agency, and we're trying to make things easier and better for them, not harder. So let's talk about what's important to you guys. So revenue opportunities. everybody kind of intuitively knows that if we can charge convenience fees, besides reducing our merchants' costs, we're also greatly increasing the revenue opportunity in our portfolio, because frankly, there's been a lot of downward pressure on rates lately, especially with additional competitors out there because regulation has eased somewhat. And because of that, we're looking for ways that we can, A, make our services stickier, and so that the merchants will stay with us longer, and B, figure out a way to maximize and get additional revenue out of that portfolio. So, and overall, we've looked at our portfolio, and in order to get to what we considered a potential revenue increase, and this includes those accounts that you guys have written with us and everything else, first we looked at the portion of our portfolio that was in restricted states. It was right around 25%, so we immediately reduced that amount. Then we took a look at what we expected additional revenue. Now, this is on average. So on average, our portfolio was the revenue on our portfolio was going to increase by 38 basis points. 38%, excuse me. Now, 38 basis points. That's the entire portfolio. Keeping in mind, we have some very large merchants that pay a relatively low rate. We also have some small merchants that are probably paying a higher effective rate or about the same effective rate as what the convenience fee would be. And therefore, the overall increase is very small. However, if you start looking at your ICP, your ideal customer profile, the ideal customer is a relatively larger merchant that's probably processing upwards of $750,000 a month. And they're probably at a relatively low interchange plus rate. Our beta merchant, in fact, our revenue is going to increase by 320%. They are now being charged 42 basis points. And even though we will probably lower their rate somewhat on the non-fee account for the payments that they can't take using convenience fees, the increase by charging a nominal convenience fee, and for them it will be $5, on those payments generates that much more revenue. And that's just on the cards, not on the ACH, because we have to charge the same fee on ACH unless there's a waiver. And the waiver, let me sort of backtrack a second on that. The Gateway Logic also allows for a supervisor or a manager to waive a fee, because the last thing we want to do is subject our collection agency merchants to additional litigation. And if there's a consumer on the phone that's complaining, I absolutely don't want to pay a fee, I shouldn't have to do that, they need to selectively be able to waive the fee. In that case, if they waive the fee, the gateway puts that transaction to the non-fee mid where they're being billed normally. In addition to existing merchants, which is a right place for us to start, there's also the new merchant potential, because there are merchants that are always looking to reduce fees, and while you might not have been willing to go in and undercut and offer bargain basement rates just to get a merchant away from somebody else, if you go in and you offer the convenience fee model, they get reduced fees, you get additional revenue, and we also get to offer them all of these other options and features that go along with it. Each of you will be able to calculate your own revenue increase based upon your current portfolios and based upon what you have coming up in the pipeline. Your RMs will also be reaching out to you individually to discuss your revenue share and your potential targets. And that will be ongoing as we approach launch and as we move forward from the launch and moving. The one thing I do want to say is the first couple of months is sort of in beta mode from February 1st. So we will probably be able to board maybe half a dozen merchants in that time for the convenience fee model, because it does take some customization for the pop-up windows and that kind of thing. So it will kind of be first come, first serve, but we will have all of these in the pipeline and we'll start working on them. And if we can do it more quickly, we absolutely will, because it's to everybody's benefit for us to get in there and to get into the marketplace. So in addition to the revenue opportunity and being able to offer this, we're going to give you a bunch of different sales tools and provide you with support. So we have a full marketing plan built out for offering convenience fees. The first thing we did, which is actually listed last year, is we sent out a merchant survey on Friday to all existing merchants. It was not a sales approach. It was simply saying, we're getting ready to launch a new product regarding convenience fees, and we'd like to know what your concerns and what your interests are on the convenience fees. We're gathering the data that we've started to receive already from that survey, and we will absolutely report it to you. And if we have merchants that are affiliated with any of you as agents, we will provide those leads to you as soon as we have them. I have already reached out to some of you as I've talked to people going to meetings and things when they've told me that, yes, they're interested in hearing about it. I've already reached out to you guys when you're the agents involved with those merchants, and we will continue to do that. Second thing we did was today's webinar. We are reorienting the webinar. This one is very sales oriented. It's very, while it provides information about convenience fees, doesn't really provide detailed information from a merchant perspective. So we're developing a merchant version of the webinar so that we can offer it up as an educational tool. And it really won't be sales. At the end, it will be, oh, by the way, PayScout has this. It will be more about the compliance and the considerations that you need to think about. The other thing we have is we have an AI sales support tool, which is brand new. If you guys have questions about that, it's something that we use, but also something that we can offer to help you turn your leads into interested prospects. You can reach out to your RMs to discuss that, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it because we want to be able to support you in your sales efforts. We also are developing collateral material. We have one single-page flyer that we'll be distributing to everybody that we've developed so far, and there will be additional materials as well, in addition to blog posts, which are more educational content, and a number of other items that we'll be offering. The one thing that I did say I was going to, and this is the example of the flyer, for those of you that have not seen it yet, some of you have. So one of the things that we're still working through, one of the restrictions on convenience fees, I had said I would come back to this, is on recurring payments. And the rule says you can't charge convenience fees on recurring payments or on an installment payment plan. Based upon a lot of compliance discussion with our attorneys, we have decided that the first payment in a recurring plan can carry that fee. The follow-up ones can't at this point. The logic for that is built into the gateway. We do realize that's a huge impact in the ARM space. And we are hearing pushback on that from those beta merchants that we've been talking with. So we are also exploring some options of how we can be compliant and still be able to charge the convenience fee on all payments in a plan, whether it's not considered a plan and we get individual authorizations or some other way of handling that. But that is in process, and that will be included at launch. And when we have additional information for you guys, we will absolutely send that out to you. To discuss the application details, so for credit cards, This is really just what's unique. So for credit cards, we need 2 MIDs with each deposit account. So we'll need one with the merchant's DBA for the non-fee transactions, which would be the existing MID if it's an existing merchant, or a new one. And we need one DB with the DBA PSG asterisk submerchant abbreviation for the fee transactions. There'll also be a PayScout MID behind that, but you don't need to worry about that because that's one MID for PayScout, and that's how we split the fees. The convenience fee transactions go to that PayFac submerchant MID. The ones that are not eligible for fees go to the normal MID. For ACH, we have 2 accounts for each deposit account in the same manner, one with regular billing for the non-fee transactions, and one that will not be billed for the convenience fee transactions. There's also, again, a PayScout-owned account for the fees. ACH is slightly different than cards because ACH transactions don't have to follow the card brand rules, except that the card brand rules say every payment type coming through a particular channel has to carry the same fee. Therefore, the ACH transactions will be done as 2 separate transactions. The regular transaction for the principal amount goes to the merchant's account, and the one for the fee portion goes directly to a PayScout named account. The authorization will be very specific, telling the consumer that it will be 2 separate transactions, and they'll see 2 separate line items on their bill, or not on their bill in this case, but on their bank statement for the 2 separate debits. The reason we have to set up 2 separate ACH accounts for the merchant is because one is billed to the merchant normally, as it is today, and the other one that is covered by the convenience fees for those fee-eligible transactions is not billed to the merchant, and we can't do that in one ACH account. For new merchants, we will need the regular PayScout MES ARM application with the ISO TNCs. That's the one you're used to using now. We'll also need a submerchant PayScout MES merchant application with submerchant TNCs. There's no difference in the application. It's identical except for the terms and conditions that are attached. We'll need, as we always do, the MOTO questionnaire from MES, the PayScout ARM questionnaire, PayScout deployment and billing form. We must use the PayWire gateway for this because that's where all the logic is. Checking account setup form, convenience fee addendum, which is a 2-page document. We don't have that fully formed yet. It's 99% there, but we will get you packages. Your RMs will get you packages as soon as everything's ready, just before the launch date. PayLiance ACH application if you're adding ACH. And I realize that some of you have your own ACH options, and we're not going to get in the middle of that. What you typically do is what you do, but these are options that are available to you. PayLiance collection agency questionnaire and document list if you're adding ACH, and a location list to handle any separate deposit accounts for ACH, because we only need one application even if it's a multiple MID merchant. Keep in mind that we will need this 2-account setup for every MID that a merchant has. So for some of you that have really large merchants with 10, 15, 20 or more MIDs, we'll need to duplicate the MIDs for convenience fees for each of that. I know that sounds daunting. Your RMs will help you. Don't worry about that. And then any additional required supporting documents. That hasn't changed because we're still doing the same underwriting, and we're setting up the payment facilitator and doing the same underwriting so that if a merchant, which is very likely in collections, gets above the required amount, there's a ceiling for what you can do as a sub-merchant as a payment facilitator. On the back end at MES, they've already done the due diligence, and we just convert it. It's totally seamless, and the merchant doesn't see anything. It still has the same label, but it's not titled in the way as a payment facilitator, so that we're not running afoul of the card brand rules. For existing merchants, we'll just need the additional applications, as I said, the submerchant PayScout agreement, We will need a new deployment and billing form because we're switching gateways, and location list to handle any separate deposit accounts for ACH, because we already have an ACH application in place for most of these merchants. For an existing merchant, we won't need an actual application, we'll just need the additional location information and any additional documents to update underwriting. So if a MID has been open, if you've got an existing merchant and you've had a MID that's been open for a year or more, we're going to probably need updated financials and bank statements and that kind of thing. But that's just business as usual. That's not any change because of convenience fees. Would be the same if we were adding any other MID. In terms of fees, so we have established a fee matrix, and in the addendum, we reserve the right to review periodically, looking at transaction trends and seeing if we need to update the convenience fee to make sure that it's covering costs, et cetera, et cetera. The merchant doesn't get to choose here, but obviously we do want their buy-in, and we've tried really hard to keep the fees as low as possible because, again, we don't want to restrict the number of payments they get because it's a fee that's ridiculous compared to their typical payments. So basically what you'll need to do as an agent is look at their merchant statements, which you're used to doing currently, look at several months worth, not just one, and look and see what their average transaction amount is. And we've set up the convenience fees in buckets based upon an average transaction amount within these limits here. So we've got it listed up to $300. For every $50 up to $500, you'd add an additional $1 convenience fee. We have it listed up to $30 for a $1,000 average balance. If their average transaction is higher than $1,000, we don't recommend convenience fees because the fees themselves are going to be ridiculously high, and it will really cut down on their payments, obviously. In my experience in the collection realm, the only merchants that have average transaction sizes that are above even that 300 mark are typically commercial agencies, and they probably want to think twice about whether to offer this or not. So bottom line is it's reduced processing costs for your merchants, increased revenue margins for you. It's a true win-win. The product titled, as you've seen, 360-degree fee-free payments, and the 360-degree, for anyone that didn't catch the obvious, has to do with the fact that it's compliant all around, not just on the collection side, not just on the card brand side, but for everything.
Thank you very much, Fran. At this time, we are creating an opportunity for all of the attendees to submit any questions that you may have. At the bottom of your Zoom screen there is a chat icon, and you can see that the messages can be sent to Fran directly there. So you can type in questions that may have come up throughout the webinar, and we're going to give Fran a chance to address those questions. Again, I remind you, if you have a question at any time after the webinar or we close here, you can contact your relationship manager at any time. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. This concludes our scheduled programming for the day. And at this time, Fran, I'm going to ask if there are questions that you have received that are relevant for the group, relevant for us to discuss here. By all means, take the time to walk us through it.
Thank you. So we have one question, so I'm going, if someone's raised their hand, I'm going to unmute. Tanya?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, can.
That's probably a funny question. Most people can hear me even from the other states they're in. In regards to the last screen, can you go back one screen real quick?
I thought I could. Hang on. Yep.
Okay. And this is a dumb question, but I'm trying to make things stupid proof because I don't know if I'm special and I have those clients that, anyway. On the average transaction amounts, they go from 100, like the first thing, up to $100, $3. $100 to $125, $4. But then the very next says $125 to $150. Shouldn't that be $126 to $150? The next one $151 to $200. The next one $201.
No, because it says greater than. That's what that little arrow thingy is.
Okay, so $125.01 to $150.99 will be $5.
No, 125.01 to 150.00 will be $5.
All right. Sorry. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, question.
Yes, but we're probably not going to get quite that specific. So if it's 125 and change, it's going to fit in, you know, the 125 bucket. That'll be a discussion you'll have with your RM based upon whether it's at the high end or the low end, and we'll look at that.
Got it. Cool. That was it. Thanks.
You're welcome. We have another.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Fran. Do you get another question?
Yeah, I don't see any other hands raised, but we do have some typed questions. So let me go to those. Someone said, I attended an FTC conference and their position on fees is very negative. What happens if there's a lawsuit? Who all would be involved? So that really depends on how the lawsuit plays out. So we are endeavoring to have a fully compliant program. And we have done our best to make sure that it's compliant all around. However, we're not going to absolve anybody of liability because we're not going to assume, and the merchant agreements themselves that underlie all of this don't assume liability. That eventually falls on the merchant. However, we feel very confident based upon the conversations that we've had that if a collection agency is sued on an FDCPA violation, they have very good grounds for getting that lawsuit dismissed. We will certainly help out in any way that we can, but we can't absolve them of liability. So basically, they've never touched the fee. They're not charging the fee. Most of the case law in most of the states, except for the ones that we've restricted, have been very clear that, okay, if the agency didn't charge the fee, it's not an incidental charge, which is the reason it's FDCPA compliant. A collection agency is not allowed to add any incidental charges to an account that they're collecting unless it's specifically authorized either by the underlying contract or by state law. Only state that specifically allows those fees is Wisconsin. So the collection agency is not charging it. We, as a payment processing entity, are not subject to FDCPA. Therefore, there's no valid FDCPA claim. Card brand rules, there's no law that covers card brand rules. There are different state laws that specifically cover convenience fees or surcharging, but card brand rules are a contractual thing, and that would be more inclined if Visa were to come and audit our funding bank and then audit the processor and then see how we're handling these things and we're charging convenience fees, and are we allowed to, if it's done in a way that doesn't comply with the card brand rules, there could be fines. The merchant could lose access to their ability to process and accept payments because they could be blacklisted and they could have their processing canceled. Those are worst case scenarios, but that's more a matter of a civil suit and contractual issues rather than law and regulation. So I hope that answers that. Next question we have here.
And Fran, I think we are out of time here, Fran. I'm sorry if I know you may not have gotten to some of the written questions there,
okay,
but we take those up with the RMs. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, we thank the attendees and thank you, Fran, for leading an informative webinar.
You're welcome, and thank you. And as George had said, this has been recorded, and so we will be distributing this, and we will respond individually to these questions that we have. Apologies. Thank you all.